episode in our series on restorative practices. We are so happy to have you here. For today's session, we are going to be talking about doing the work through peace building circles. And so we're so excited to have you. But before we get started, we are going to play just a quick disclaimer from the U.S. Department of Education.
This resource was developed in 2024 by the Nita M. Lowy 21st Century Community Learning Center's 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center, NTEC, funded under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education Department and administered by Synergy Enterprises Incorporated under Cooperative Agreement Number 287E230009 with the Department's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. Opinions expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the position or policy of the Department, nor does mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the Department or the federal government. This resource is in the public domain and is available at 21stcclcntech.org. Authorization to reproduce it in whole or in part is granted.
Awesome. So now that we have been disclaimed, we are ready to get started. And we want to quickly touch base on the vision and mission of the 21st CCLC NTAC. All Nita M. Lowy 21st Century Community Learning Centers and SEA coordinators and professionals obtain the knowledge and skills to implement programs and engage and empower students and their families to build lasting success as lifelong learners. And our mission for the 21st CCLC NTAC is to provide resources, practice, evidence-based resources, professional learning opportunities to build the capacity of 21st CCLC stakeholders and support underserved youth and their families. And so with that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Yana, and I am a TA liaison with the 21st CCLC NTAC. And I come from a background as a school day, after school summer educator and project director, and now working on the coaching and professional learning side and having the privilege of coming out to work with programs in person and also virtually. And I'm joined by my colleague, Brittany.
Hi, Yana. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here too. Restorative practices is something that's near and dear to my heart. I spent about 7 years in the public classroom teaching K-12 students. And then I had the pleasure of working in a nonprofit as a program director of an after-school, out-of-school time program, which eventually became a 21st CCLC program. But in my experiences as an educator, I use restorative practices in my classroom and in the OSD program. So I'm very excited to be touching on peace circles with you today, Yana.
Awesome sauce. So I don't know why I've been using awesome sauce a lot. I've just noticed that about myself. Okay. So today we are going to try to talk about the following objectives. We're going to talk about how understanding the restorative practice continuum. We're going to talk about how to use affective statements and questions in programs. We're going to practice leading impromptu conversations, and we're going to develop our understanding of peace building circles. Now, the thing to know about restorative practices, they are about continuously addressing needs, and restorative practices should be primarily preventative. So building community, building relationships within your program environment in order to prevent serious disciplinary issues. Some research shows that the best kind of breakdown is for about 80% of restorative practices to be preventative and only 20% of restorative practices to be in response to behaviors or disciplinary issues. So we're going to talk about restorative practices both as a preventative measure of how to create relationships and create a community where all students feel safe, as well as how to use restorative practices to respond to behaviors, to respond to serious disciplinary actions where you need to recommit to that community and bring everyone back together after a serious disturbance. Now, the thing to know about why we want to focus on preventative restorative practices is we want to understand that when we have a positive community, our students will feel more safe, they will feel more welcome, and thus it really decreases the frequency of disciplinary issues. It reduces the frequency of conflict because part of restorative practices is teaching students how to engage in productive conflict resolution rather than doing it in ways that are counterproductive or can lead to disciplinary behaviors. So we really want to help students manage conflict in using their words in ways that are going to help them come to solutions to build consensus. And so when we focus on these preventative restorative or proactive restorative practices, we are preventing future behaviors and future more serious conflicts. And we are teaching students the skills they need to really work in a community and be part of a community and sometimes deal with conflict. And a lot of these proactive restorative practices help our students to build empathy, to build self regulation, to develop a sense of responsibility to the community. So a lot of those SEL competencies that we talk about that have been really a important area of development and focus for our programs. These are things that we can work to address and work to build those skills through restorative practices. And when students develop those skills, they help them be much more productive and successful in our out of school time programs and in life. Now, you may be familiar with the history of restorative practices or the sort of general practice of restorative practices. It is deeply rooted in the traditions of various indigenous communities and religious practices that really emphasize the importance of community cohesion, mutual respect, and collective responsibility. Restorative practices are not about punishment, they're about re-engaging the community and bringing peace to the community. So for example, among Maori communities in New Zealand, Aboriginal groups and have practiced forms of restorative justice for centuries. And these are practiced on focused on healing and reconciliation, restoring harmony within the community after conflict or any kind of wrongdoing. And so when any conflicts or maladjusted behaviors occur, the tradition, the focus is on bringing the entire community together to openly discuss issues. So unlike a punitive model where students or anyone is punished for behaviors that are outside the norms of the community, the focus is on really addressing the harm caused, holding the wrongdoer accountable when necessary, but especially finding ways to repair relationships and really to reintegrate people who might have caused harm within that community, because we are all interconnected, whether somebody has done something that is harmful to the community or not. And so now this idea of restorative practices has been making its way into education, into modern education systems, because we now kind of honor and understand the role that these can take in fulfilling the goals of our education system, because we are all part of a community. So we want to strengthen those community bonds and promote a culture of empathy and understanding, while also reducing incidents of bullying and of violence and other sort of inappropriate behaviors that we want to reduce. Now, when we are implementing restorative practices, there are a variety of strategies that we want to take, that we want to practice, that encourage students to take responsibility for their actions, help them understand the ways their behavior impacts others, and actively participate in making amends when that is necessary. And when we are able to foster that kind of environment of open communication and mutual respect, we are going to be able to address conflicts and help students develop essential social and emotional skills. Because again, our students are part of a community, even when they act in ways that are not constructive to the rest of the community. A lot of research has shown that in addition to the benefits of rebuilding that community, Restorative practices are also shown to increase student engagement, reduce disciplinary actions like suspensions and expulsions, and they enhance the overall academic performance of our students. Because when we're prioritizing the well being of our students and our community, we are able to create that positive learning environment where every child feels safe. So we want to work together to implement these practices that have, centuries of history of them, to demonstrate their effectiveness in our own out of school time and also school day environments, where we can create a sense of safety for our young people, where they are able to reconnect and take responsibility when necessary, because they're all part of that community. We have to kind of learn to live and learn together. And so, one of the practices that we want to highlight today is we want to talk a little bit about peace building circles. And now, peace building circles are a way to create a safe space for dialogue in our program environment. Because they are a way to increase and promote inclusivity and respect. These circles allow students to come together to share their thoughts and feelings openly, fostering that sense of community, fostering the importance of honesty and collaboration. The structure of peace building circles includes something like a talking piece. So that could be a stick or a stone or any kind of something that is used to take turns to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. So making sure that we are prioritizing the voices of the community and making sure everyone has that opportunity for contribution. Uh, when you're starting a peace building circle practice, you have to set community guidelines and expectations, um, and really emphasize the importance of listening and really active listening strategies so that we really try to understand the perspectives of others. And we want to facilitate and encourage honesty in these communication practices. Engaging in peace building circles is a way to build trust in your community, to build mutual understanding, and make it easier to address conflicts as they arise. Now, the important thing to note is that peace building circles are a preventative measure. We do these before there has been any conflict. These are about having a regular practice of honesty and having a regular practice of community. And we can use these for a variety of purposes like community building and problem solving. And again, these are something that we want and can have them work as a regular practice. It's not just a one-time thing because students need time to practice these kinds of skills and become more comfortable in your program environment. So you have to give them the time to do so. And when we're able to create these kinds of respectful and inclusive environments, these will help our students feel connected and valued in our program environment. So, when we're talking about restorative practices, we can talk about a restorative practices continuum. And this ranges from proactive measures, so things you do ahead of any kind of conflict, any kind of disagreement. And proactive measures include building relationships. Um, and then there's the reactive at the other end of the continuum, the reactive strategies. These are strategies that you use when something has gone wrong, when there has been some type of conflict, and that is when you are addressing those harms. And we want to understand this community as it applies to us because there is a right place and a right time for these different strategies. Now, we want to, as previously mentioned, emphasize and spend most of our time on those preventative, proactive strategies because they create the conditions where, when you need to use those reactive strategies, your students are prepared and are able to engage constructively, honestly, and really be part of that welcoming community. The proactive strategies that you may consider using include building community trust. Those can include things like effective, positive statements, having regular class meetings, using those peace building circles on a regular basis. We want to make sure our students feel safe, seen, and protected in our environments. They are what lay the groundwork for the positive learning environment that you want to cultivate in your program environment. Now, reactive strategies come into play when something goes wrong. There has been an inappropriate student behavior, maybe there's been violence, maybe something that has happened in the community that is significantly impacting your students. These are ways when we experience a conflict to react to them, to address the harm, to rebuild relationships where they have been negatively affected, and to reintegrate the person who has caused harm into the community. These might include restorative circles for addressing specific incidences, mediation sessions, and other strategies for addressing those harms as they occur in your program. When we're able to balance those proactive and reactive strategies, primarily spending 80% of our time on those proactive strategies, we're able to create a supportive environment for students where they feel valued, where they feel understood, and they feel safe to come forward and speak about what they're feeling and what's going on with them. We want to create that environment where students are able to come forward and they know that they will be heard, they will be respected, and they can be part of the process of community rebuild. So one of the proactive strategies I mentioned is affective statements. So I'm going to turn it over to Brittany for talk about affective statements. Brittany, over to you.
Thanks, Yana. So affective statements are really very like a key integral part to restorative practices, right? They allow us to be able to express feelings, but in a constructive way. It makes interactions feel personal and also empathetic. And instead like in a negative frame of mind, like stop doing this, stop being disruptive. You reframe what you say by using an I statement, meaning something like, I feel frustrated when there is noise because it makes it hard for everyone to concentrate. And so you notice the difference between saying, stop being disruptive and I feel frustrated whenever there's noise, and giving a reason why makes it personal. And then there's that empathetic piece where it's hard for everyone to concentrate whenever there's so much noise. And it really helps make things, it puts things more into a clearer perspective for the person that you're addressing, the student that you're addressing. But it also, that positive angle takes that negative piece out of the way, and students respond in a different way. Instead of saying things like, stop doing this, to say, I feel or I appreciate when, really it causes a different response from your students because it promotes open communication and addresses emotional intelligence. And these are essential for creating a respectful and inclusive school environment, right? When we express feelings in a clear and respectful manner, we are actually helping students recognize the consequences of their actions and ultimately developing empathy for their peers and for others. And this practice is also really helpful whenever we're trying to work through de-escalating a conflict, right? To use the I statements and to clearly express our feelings in those moments rather than accusing or demanding something in that situation, right? It makes it easier for everyone to kind of find that mutual agreeable solution, that common ground, and be able to ultimately move forward. So we're going to practice some affective statements in an activity together. And we're so glad that you're here to walk through this with us. And I would absolutely love to hear from people in the chat. as we go through this, this little activity. Or if you want to unmute and talk, then that's fine too. So here we go. We're going to practice writing an affective statement. We're going to share with you a scenario and ask, how might you respond using an affective statement? And then you just type your answer there in the chat. So here we go, scenario 1. Sam table. 4 other students are drawing and have told them to stop. So what affective statement might you be able to use in this scenario? Keeping in mind I statements, keeping in mind sharing of feelings and empathy. How would you address Sam? And for that matter, the other students who have asked them to stop? I might say something like, Sam, I see that the other students here have asked you to stop. And I wonder whether we might take a break. I feel that we have a way to work together if maybe we try taking a walk around the room to get our wiggles out. Right? I'm also providing an opportunity for Sam to do something that's just a little bit different, that's not necessarily sitting at the table. I might say something like, I can see that some of your peers are frustrated. How are you feeling? And just by using affective statements and saying that, you know, I feel this way, you also might encourage the peers to try to use I feel statements in this situation. Thank you, Yana, popping in the chat there. I feel angry because my drawing is all messed up. Absolutely, right? Let's take a look at another scenario. So this is Sarah, and Sarah is playing Uno with a group. A new student who just started at your program sits down, but Sarah did not deal them any cards. Oh. What might you say as an affective statement in this moment? Thinking about what you see, what you're observing, and how might we express our feelings. Perhaps saying to Sarah, I feel great whenever I'm included in a game. Oh, we've got a couple here. So we have a suggestion, Sarah. I see you didn't give any blank cards. I feel like she would feel welcome if you included her. Absolutely. Or, hey guys, it makes me sad to see Sarah left out of playing Uno. Do you think we could include her? Yeah, that's a great suggestion. All right, let's take a look at scenario 3. In scenario 3, we have Jack, and we have told Jack to sit down at least 3 times in the last 20 minutes. So what have we observed? Well, Jack is struggling to stay in his seat. What do we want to express to Jack? Well, there seems to be perhaps a level of frustration. How can we frame that in an I statement to Jack? I might say something like, I see that you are getting up out of your seats, which feels like very distracting for me whenever I'm trying to teach this lesson. How can we find something for you that feels comfortable, that we are not being distracting? Or maybe I find it really hard to concentrate whenever I'm worried about uh, how you are leaving your seat and I don't know why. Can you tell me more about what's going on? And let's take a look at one more scenario. So this is scenario 4. We have a class that's playing outside. And as you come in, Fatima started bouncing a basketball in the hallway, which goes against your rules. If you were able to join us a couple weeks ago when we were talking about group norms, that's something that we might also think about in this moment, right? That what is the established expectation for hallway behavior? And we could use an I statement in this moment to help redirect the behavior by referring directly to whatever that expectation is for the hallway, right? So we could say something like, I know that we just went outside and had a lot of fun, but we should try to remember whenever we are in the hallway that this is the expectation, right? So those are some of the things that you could be seeing every day in your program, right? Who hasn't seen one of those things? And you can use affective statements in those moments to help address in a very genuine way that student and whatever that behavior is that you're seeing that you are not comfortable with. So then we get to things that are really more like the questions, right? We've identified, we've observed, we identified the behavior, we've observed it, we've said in an I statement. There's that second layer to it about getting a little bit deeper to encourage some reflection and some empathy from the student, right? So some examples that we could include are, how do you feel when this happens? Or what can we do to make things right? And these questions help students think about their actions and how those actions impact others in our programs. When we ask these questions, it offers students that opportunity to just get a little bit deeper and self-reflective and consider what other people might be perceiving from that behavior. And this practice not only helps resolve any conflict that we have that comes up, but it also fosters that building of compassion and understanding within the program culture, right? Affective questions are really a powerful tool in conflict resolution when things get, a little bit more escalated, as they help guide individuals towards thinking about how are they feeling, what are their emotions, and how does that relate to the actions that we're seeing. And all of this leads to a more meaningful resolutions that they can work out together. And so we're going to use these affective questions, which I will drop in the chat so that you can hold on to them as we do these. But we're going to do a little role play, and I'm looking for some folks who would be willing to volunteer to act out these little scenarios. So these are our 3 affective questions that we're going to think about that I dropped in the chat. How do you think your actions made others feel? what was going on in your mind at the time and how can you make things right. And we're going to take a look at applying those to scenario one. We have a fifth grader, Alex, who is frequently talking out of turn and distracting classmates during the lesson. Several of his classmates are asking him to stop, but Alex doesn't understand why they are so upset. Alex is getting irritated by the requests of his classmates and is now elevating his voice. So, is there somebody that would be willing to either play the students or the instructor along with us today to act out a conversation using these affective questions? Perhaps I will tag one of my teammates here. Michelle.
Yes. I can be either. I could be Alex or the instructor.
Why don't you go ahead and be the instructor and let somebody else take a different perspective on applying these questions?
Okay. So, I'd be like, Alex, the whole classroom, the whole room is really trying to like pay attention and they're getting upset. And how do you think your actions are going to make your peers feel?
Well, I don't know. I just feel like I just want to talk to people and like I'm not really interested in what's going on and I don't understand why they're frustrated with me because I'm just trying to be their friend.
So what I hear you saying is that what was going through your mind was that you're trying to be someone's friend, everybody's friend, and you really want to, share what you have to share.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to be friends with people.
Okay. So with it making your peers feel like really aggravated and maybe it's distracting them and they're not able to pay attention, how do you think we can make this right to where everyone's good?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I do feel bad that like they're distracted. I don't want to bother people, but like I just want to have friends. So, I don't know, maybe I can ask them. Maybe I ask them that they could be my friend.
Yeah, I think that would be great if you ask them to be your friend. And maybe we just add something else to our group norms. Maybe we have like a talking stick where, everybody holds the stick and that's when they get to talk. And that way you won't irritate them and you won't elevate your voice. How does that sound?
Oh, well, I kind of like that idea. Taking turns makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I think then everybody will get along great and everyone will get to talk.
I love talking.
We know, Alex. No, I'm sorry. That did not go in.
No, but Michelle, I love how like I mean it was very personalized. Obviously, like we're not in a I'm not a child, right? Like this could go any which way with any student that might be exhibiting the same things that Alex is exhibiting, right? But like I love the questions that you asked and then how you built upon them by thinking about how I responded and acknowledging the responses that I had. Like that's a very important piece to be able to paraphrase and to acknowledge like I hear you saying like that was a very strong strategy that we highly recommend whenever we're having these kinds of conversations, right? And it's not something that's like we didn't put it here on the slide, but it was kind of that was a natural step that you started to take in your response to
Yeah,
Alex.
I think he was genuine about wanting to be everyone's friend, but just kind of wants to also be that person that shares and doesn't know really how to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for role playing on that with me, Michelle. Let's try another. So here we have second grader Jordan. And Jordan has been teasing another during outdoor playtime. He called Sam slow while he was on the monkey bars. Then, while they were in line getting ready to go inside and start program, Sam asked what was for snack, and Jordan called him a fatty. This made Sam upset, and Sam went to the back of the line away from Jordan. Gosh, that makes me sad. Is there somebody who would like to role play the instructor and the students? We can focus on Sam. On Jordan, who is the student who's made Sam feel bad. Let's see. Maybe I'll call on another colleague. Hi, Chaz.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Do you want to be the instructor or do you want to be Sam?
Oh, I'm good with either, but I guess let's do the instructor.
Okay, perfect. Take it away.
So, Jordan, it makes me really sad to see that Sam's trying to separate from you whenever you guys interact. How do you think what you just said to him made him feel?
Well, I don't know. I don't really care, because it's true.
Hmm, that's interesting. All right, so what was going through your mind when you said it? What were you thinking when you said that to him?
Well, I mean, they're always going to the front of the line and like really excited about snack and focused on food. And I just don't understand why they always have to go first.
I understand. I understand. And I also understand that you really want to get your lunch, right? But we also don't know what other people are thinking and feeling, right? So there could be a lot of things going on with Sam where he could, feel like he really needs this lunch, right? And when you call him names and you isolate him, that can really hurt his feelings. Do you think it might hurt your feelings if somebody were to start calling you names?
Yeah, I mean, I people have called me names before and I don't like it either. So I understand. It doesn't feel good.
Right. Yeah. And I also understand that sometimes when we get frustrated about people, doing things to us, sometimes we repeat that behavior. But it's important to think about how that behavior made us feel and then think about how it will make others feel if we do it to them. So, how do you think you can sort of make things right with Sam?
Well, I mean, when people have called me names, like I just want them to say sorry and just not do it again. So
Mhm.
uh maybe I should tell Sam I'm sorry. Or maybe I should tell Jordan I'm sorry.
I think that's a great way to start. Why don't you go ahead and let him know that you're sorry and that you feel kind of bad about it, and then we'll take it from there.
Great. Thanks, Chaz. That was great.
No problem.
I so like this is clearly this is a bullying type of incident, right? It sounds like maybe there's something this doesn't just necessarily happen out of the blue. It does seem to be something that is potentially built upon over time, right? And I think you tapped into that, Chaz, right? By recognizing that okay, we all know like the science behind bullying is, a bully is somebody who was also bullied, and so tapping into that and like, has this happened to you before and how does it make you feel is really important in this scenario because that self reflection piece, right? To think about, okay, this is how I felt at a time, and now what am I doing that is just really repeating the same thing. Um, and again, like we're not actually the student and the teacher here, but I think we are kind of starting to get the idea of how using questions like this can help drive towards a restorative solution for the students, right? We've got one more scenario for you here, and we'll jump through this kind of quickly. A group of students led by Taylor has excluded a new seventh grader, Jamie, for participating in group activities and games. Today, they told Jamie he couldn't join their basketball game because they already have enough players. But yesterday, you also saw Taylor leave their book bag on a chair when Jamie came over to sit with them during dinner. So we got a lot of things going on here, I think. Is there somebody who would like to have a quick conversation, role play with these characters? Well, let's just talk through it quickly. So we might be talking to Taylor. We might be talking to Jamie. They're questioning, how do you think your actions make others feel? We need to ask in multiple places here, right? They told Jamie he couldn't join their basketball team. We need to ask in that moment, how do you think that that action has made Jamie feel? But then we also need to have a conversation with Taylor and about the leaving their book bag on the chair when Jamie came over to sit with dinner, right? To ask the same questions there. Each of these conversations will go probably a little bit differently. You're going to have to ask them about what was going through their minds at the time and how you can make things right. But ultimately, you're going to have to probably be bringing these two students together and going through these questions in a way again, so that they are able to identify within themselves, right, that self-reflective piece, and but they need to be able to work together moving forward. So there's going to be that next layer of coming together and restoring the peace, right? Um, Great. So hopefully you found the affective question scenario role play interesting and helpful. It is a great technique. And I even recommend like have these questions on like a little card that you can keep for a reference with your staff, like if situations come up, so that you can just, pull them out right away and address whatever situations you might be facing as they come up. Now, there are other things that we can do aside from affective statements and affective questioning. And we're kind of already leading up to this, but we can talk about, in small impromptu conversations that will address these issues. So, what do these conversations look like? We know that we're going to be using this whenever an issue might arise. But the conversation, the key here is that it's really keeping it brief and to the point. And these conversations, ideally, they're going to be preventing the small issues that we encounter from escalating into larger conflicts. And when we address things immediately through these quick impromptu conversations, we can help resolve any misunderstandings and hopefully also create a place where we can return to that positive atmosphere that the program had. The key here is remaining calm and focused, right? To separate our own frustrations that we might be feeling in that moment and to be calm and using those affective statements and questions to then guide the conversation, kind of like I was mentioning in our third scenario there. So this approach helps to reinforce the positive behaviors that we want to see, but it also helps to build strong relationships between students. It helps show students that that their concerns, their voices are taken seriously, and that there are immediate supportive responses to whatever the actions are that we're seeing. So we're going to talk about how do we plan these impromptu conversations, because that's an important piece. It's not something is so some folks can probably do this on the fly, but you really need to put some thought process and practice to be able to use this as a strategy successfully on an ongoing basis. So we're going to take a look at how to plan and then conduct the small impromptu conversations. These conversations really, like I said, are critical to addressing things in the moment when they arise and from preventing them from getting bigger, from escalating, right? We're going to take a look at this structured framework to help us know how we can work through this conversation and keep it focused. So let's take a look at this framework to guide our planning. This framework here, we have identify, choose, use, and agree. So in identify, we are trying to identify the issue, that we need to clearly define the behavior or issue that needs to be addressed. We're going to choose the right time and place. It is in good practice, best practices. It's in everybody's toolkit. We all should know, hopefully, that like we do not want to be calling things out in front of a big class or calling loud attention to it, right? Time and place is extremely important. You need to select that uh, appropriate space where people feel safe, having privacy, right? And we're not trying to cause a larger distraction by having this conversation. So these are quiet, off to the side in the moment. You might like kneel down next to the student so that you're also like you're not overshadowing because you're taller, right? Keeping it on their playing field. We're going to use affective statements and questions like we just practiced. So we're going to prepare our statements. We're going to prepare our questions. Like I said, maybe even having a little card to help us go back to them if we need them, to help express those feelings and encourage that reflection that we need from the student on the behavior they're exhibiting. We'll listen actively, which means that when we're listening, we are not responding until they are done sharing, right? We're not going to interrupt them. And we're also then going to show empathy and understanding through in our response to them, kind of like in the one scenario that I think it was Michelle there, who recognized it. I hear you saying, right, is an important piece to listening actively, and then to paraphrase whatever you've heard. And then we're going to agree on the next steps, right? The conversation will end and we'll have an agreement on what we're going to be doing to move forward. So here's a common scenario. And feel free to drop things in the chat box. We have Chris, who frequently interrupts the teacher by calling out answers without raising their hand, disrupting the flow of a lesson. So first, we need to identify the issue. What is the specific behavior we need to address with Chris? Well, Chris is interrupting frequently. There's that, and calling out, and is not. If there's a group norm or a classroom expectation to raise their hand, they're not following that, right? So that's the issue. Then we're going to move to choose. We're going to choose the right time and place to address Chris. So when and where should that happen? Well, whatever the opportunity you might perceive to be the best. Perhaps it is right after class, whenever the rest of the students have left. Maybe it is if you have a quiet corner of the room, or if you have a moment where everybody else is working and jiving and it's fine, that you could just have a seat and a private conversation with Chris. Right? We're keeping it quiet. We're keeping it private. It's not happening in front of everybody. What affective statements are we then going to use? What questions are we going to use? So we need to make sure that we are in this conversation pointing out to Chris how it makes us feel as the instructor, right? Maybe saying something like, Chris, I feel frustrated when the lesson gets interrupted because it disrupts everyone's learning. And we might ask questions to get a better understanding of what's going on for Chris in that moment, and how Chris is perceiving the impacts of the actions. So saying something like, how do you think your calling out affects your classmates and their ability to concentrate? And while Chris is answering that question, we're going to make sure that we're actively listening, because we want to make sure that one, we are hearing everything Chris has to say, but then that we are also able to gather the information that Chris is sharing to be able to respond to that by acknowledging, I hear you saying. So we might listen, of course, without interrupting. Things like eye contact can help acknowledge that we are listening, and then of course affirming Chris's feelings and perspectives in that moment by saying, I hear you saying, or I think I understand that what you perceive is, and fill in the blank, right? Based on that conversation. And then we'll agree on the next steps together, right? So what should the next steps be that we agree on with Chris? Well, hopefully through this conversation, we can agree that Chris will raise their hand before speaking or sharing. But that on the flip side, that we're going to provide positive reinforcement whenever they follow this rule, right? Saying, Chris, I love how you waited your turn and raised your hand to let me know that you had something that you wanted to share. So we've planned out how we want this conversation to go. Let's reflect for a moment on what we planned and how it might be implemented. How do we think that this approach can actually help address the issue? What is different about going about it this way than it might be through letting our frustration take over and just being like, Chris, you got to stop? What challenges could we face whenever implementing this kind of framework as well, right? So the things that I think that really help address the issue, right? It's making it personal. We're using empathy. We have a plan of action to be able to say, all right, this is a decision that we're making together about how we're going to do things. There's some ownership on both parties, right? Chris is going to try to raise his hand, and I'm, as a facilitator, going to acknowledge whenever and positively reinforce whenever I see that Chris is following that rule. What are your thoughts? Feel free to chime in, drop in the chat if you have anything that you'd like to share as an observation or your 2 cents on this approach. There's always going to be challenges when trying to implement any of these strategies. It's not necessarily something that, on the first try is always going to be 100% successful. It is something that's going to have to be practiced. And as my colleague Yana was saying earlier, like circle practices are something that are ongoing. And the more that you practice using impromptu conversations to address issues that crop up in your programs like this, the more natural they will become, but also the greater effect that they will have on your students, and they themselves will start to understand, like, this is the expectation, this is the process that we go through. There's of course the possibility that things escalate, right? That is always a possible scenario. And it will have to be up to your discretion as far as how do you need to proceed moving forward. And some of the strategies that we've talked about over this series, you might have to implement in those moments. But it also might get to a place where we have to go to the other side of that continuum, where it is a more serious issue and we have to implement some serious restorative practices. But really, ideally, here we are encouraging you to consider this framework as part of your daily interactions with students. As I mentioned, practicing is important. It'll allow you to refine these skills to help you become more confident in managing these smaller issues that that pop up, but leave you feeling frustrated or challenged. And really, if you have questions or need for further resources, right, come back to this restorative practices series where we'll be going deeper into some of these practices in the last few webinars in the series. But really, when we're planning these impromptu conversations, you take the lead with your youth, right? You're putting the reins in their hands. When you think about a common issue and how you would address it using the effective statements and questions, you think about the potential challenges and the benefits of this approach, and how it can help prepare for like actual real life things that are happening in your programs, and keep this in your back pocket as a strategy so that you can address those conflicts quickly and effectively. Always keeping in mind, of course, timing, the setting, the tone of the conversation. We want to stay calm. We want to be respectful. and how you can make that student feel seen and heard and supported through these conversations. Those are the ultimate uh, keys to implementing these impromptu conversations. But let's say we are working back in that peace circle realm, and we want to talk about this strategy as another way to create a culture within our program where we have reduced issues of this nature. And so I'm going to hand things back over to Yana to talk to us more about how we actually do peace circle building.
Thanks, Brittany. And oops, sorry, there we go. So now that we are ready to talk about peace building circles, these are a lot of the effective practices really line up with those same impromptu conversations that Brittany talked about. But we use these peace building circles in a much less kind of impromptu or kind of not random. That's not the right word. Just as they come up way, these are much more purposeful, planned ahead. So let's start by talking about sort of why we are using any of these peace building circles. The goals of peace building circles are about building that community, building respect, and also conflict resolution when relevant. And so when we are using these peace building circles, we always have to start with an introduction. So that's where we explain or we review the purpose of the peace building circle. And we have to set norms and guidelines, expectations. So when your students have a lot of experience with these peace building circles because you make them part of your regular practice, this is something that becomes part of their normal routine, and they know those norms, those expectations. You should always review them, but that'll be something that really becomes part of their general practice and really something that they learn to know without need of like really frequent reminders. The principles of our peace building circles should include things like equality, active listening, confidentiality, voluntary participation. You never want to pressure students to participate or to speak during a peace building circle, but our hope is that as students build confidence, as students become more comfortable in the peace building circle, they will be more likely to participate and more likely to engage. Excuse me, there was just a cat. Okay. And finally, we want to make sure that we overview the guidelines, such as using those I statements, using those that affective language, respecting others' perspectives, not speaking while someone is speaking. All of those will help make our peace building circles more successful and more welcoming to every participant. Sir, go somewhere else. Come on. I am so sorry. Okay. Now, when we are really ready to structure our peace building circle, we have to think about the different components that we want to include. So that'll start with an opening. There could be some kind of opening ritual or opening practice. Maybe you start with a shared text or quote, or everybody does 5 deep breaths. Whatever you are choosing, something that puts everybody into the mind space of we're going to do a peace building circle to help separate this practice from everything else that they do during their day to make this time special, because this is something where we are building community. We also want to have a check-in. So we want to see how students are feeling, what they're bringing to the conversation. There's different ways you can do this, whether it's every student shares one word about how they're feeling, or students have different hand signals to share kind of their general emotion, or students write on a piece of paper how they're feeling or what they think about doing a peace circle that day. Whatever it is, and there's different practices that'll work in different contexts. You want to have a plan for discussion rounds. So You should be prepared with topics of conversation, possible questions to help guide that conversation, and be ready to make sure that every student that wants to participate has the opportunity to do so. So we want to take the time to hear from everyone, and have that constructive conversation. Then we will do some problem solving, and that is where you are going to really think about, okay, what are the challenges? How are we going to fix them? What are possible solutions? What are the best ways to get through this? And then finally, you want some kind of closing activity or closing ritual that reinforces that sense of community, that helps everyone return to the kind of normal rhythm of the classroom, that emphasizes what you have done together, that provides an opportunity for reflection. Again, there are a million different ways of doing this. You can, again, end with 5 deep breaths, have a discussion question that students turn to their neighbor and talk about, have a discussion question where students write their thoughts or their feelings. So think about different methods that you think would be most appropriate for your environment. And the thing to know about making these peace building circles really meaningful is that they have to really emphasize the importance of reflection. So students aren't just, I'm so sorry, Brittany and visitor, sorry, I'm having a cat situation today. So we have to make sure that there's time and opportunities for reflection, that students aren't just talking, but taking the time to listen carefully and reflect on what others said. We want to have action steps. So when a peace building circle is used for conflict resolution, what are the next steps that the students or student involved are going to take to repair harm, to reintegrate into the community? We also want to make sure that there's ongoing support. So a peace building circle is not a one-time activity. It is something that you do over time to make sure that you are building and reinforcing that community. Now, I will ask you all to join me in a little well, not little, an activity where we are going to all be part of a peace building circle. And I will really want to take the time to help us all integrate in this activity. I would love to hear from you in the chat box as we're engaging in this, either how you're feeling while engaged in it or your responses to specific questions. If you would like to unmute yourself, please, please, please do that. We'd love to hear from you. But if you're more comfortable in the chat box, chat in the chat box, whatever works for you. So I am going to start with an introduction. Welcome everyone. Today we are gathering in a peace building circle. The purpose of our circle is to create a safe space where we can listen to each other, share thoughts, and work together to build a stronger, more respectful community. The principles of our circle are that everyone is equal. We will take turns speaking and listen to each other with respect. What is shared here stays here. Confidentiality is crucial. This is a safe space to share. Participation is voluntary, and you can choose to pass if you don't feel like you want to speak. That's okay. That's up to you. We are going to use a talking piece today. And when you hold the talking piece, it is your turn to talk. When you are not holding the talking piece, you are expected to really be an active listener. Please use I statements to share your own experiences and feelings. That's something we've practiced, creating and saying those I statements. We're going to respect each other's perspectives, and we're going to speak from the heart. So I'm going to ask us all to arrange our chairs in a circle so everyone can see each other. circle, Zoom rooms, whatever, same difference. Um, and we're going to make sure that we are all ready for this conversation. We're all comfortable and well set up for this conversation. Now, we are using a talking piece, which is, well, it happens to be a USB stick, but you can use whatever you want. So again, you're going to only speak when you are holding this USB piece, although we are in Zoom rooms, so you can not be holding it. You can just say you want to talk. So let us start like we usually do with an opening ritual. And we're all going to be silent and take 5 very deep breaths. So you want to breathe in for 5 and breathe out for 5. And you're going to do that silently to yourself. Okay, take one more big inhale and one more big exhale. All right, so to start off, let's go around the circle and share how we're feeling today. You can share one word or one sentence. I think I'll start by saying today I'm feeling like I'm in a great mood and I'm being really productive today, and that always makes me happy. Would anyone else like to share how they're feeling? Jeez Louise.
I will.
I'm passing you the talking piece.
Thank you. I'm feeling pretty good today because my AC is back on.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to share how they're feeling? I can, yes, Hillary, it sounds like is feeling hot. It is very hot outside. I stepped outside for about 2 minutes earlier today and it was not great. I was like, this is not for me. I'm an indoor, and this is why I have cats and not dogs. I'm an indoor person. So a lot of us are feeling hot. I know much of the country is in the midst of a heat wave, so it sounds like we've got a lot in common today. So now that we have all shared and imaginarily all had access to the talking piece, let's start with a discussion round. And so the question I want us to tackle today is, what does respect mean to you? Remember, when you hold the talking piece, it's your chance to talk, or unmute yourself and talk. So what does respect mean to you? Would anyone like the talking piece, aka the USB stick?
I don't want to always go first, but I'm happy to chime in.
Great.
I think for me, respect is it. You always start with that you don't. It doesn't come from a place where like it's earned. That like you automatically start with giving respect and see how things go, and it looks like listening, and it looks like caring, like genuinely asking how things are going. It's being understanding if like the answer is no, and like if somebody's acknowledged a boundary that like I'm not crossing that boundary. That's what respect looks like to me.
Hey, thank you for sharing, Brittany. I really appreciate that. I will say, when I think of respect, I think of it as caring about other people's feelings, wishes, rights, traditions, taking the time to care, to listen, and to respond to those. And we show our respect by listening, by what we do, by what we say. When we acknowledge other skills, background, and passions. Hillary doesn't have the talking piece, so she's only writing. She's not speaking. Thank you for engaging in that conversation. I want us to move from that and really think about the major issue that we want to talk about today. And we want to talk about the fact that earlier what we saw is that one of our classmates, Jamie, was being excluded from a game that was led by Taylor. And Taylor told Jamie that Jamie couldn't join the basketball team because they didn't have enough, they already had enough players. So I want to talk about that challenge and how we can resolve it. I think the first step is for us to talk about how did you feel when you saw that happen, or if you were Taylor or Jamie, how did you feel when you did that or heard that? Would anyone like to share as Jamie, who has been excluded? How do you think Jamie felt in that moment? Jamie probably felt left out, maybe hurt. You have to, so Jamie sharing, oh, Jamie maybe feels angry because Jamie is brand new to the school and just wants to be part of something, school, part of this program. How about Taylor? What would Taylor share if they were part of this group, part of this peace building circle?
I feel I'll share. I feel like Taylor might like struggle with change. And when things are different or new people like come into the fold, that maybe fear that things will change um within her like friend group, their friend group, by inviting somebody else in, a little bit of not wanting to welcome that possibility.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Brittany. So we understand for ourselves that students are bringing those feelings, and we want to understand those feelings. And once we have heard from the students, and that means the students who were involved, like Taylor and Jamie, but also any students who were witnesses, we want to find out how they're feeling. Then we can start to take steps to figure out what is a solution. So we can ask the group as a facilitator, I might ask the group of what can we do to address the harm that was caused? Or we can even start by really saying, what is the harm that was caused here? Who was harmed? What happened? A response I'm thinking about is Jamie as an individual was harmed because Jamie is feeling left out, Jamie's feeling angry, but it also affects everybody because everybody saw that and everybody might think, oh, this is how we act in our program environment. This, I could be excluded next time. This isn't just something that happened to Jamie, it could happen to me next. So it could have a really negative impact on everyone. Or a student who witnessed it and didn't, oopsie, I didn't mean to do that, didn't say anything, might feel guilty, might feel like I should have stood up and said something for Jamie and I didn't, and I feel really bad. So I feel like I need to help address the harm because even though I didn't say anything mean like Taylor did, I still feel like I didn't do what I could to help Jamie. Now, this is something where you want to be careful, where you don't want students pointing fingers at each other, but we do know that there was some harm involved in that, you know, in this case, Taylor did something wrong. But we, like, our goal is for Taylor to acknowledge it and for Taylor to really hear what Jamie's feeling, maybe what other students are feeling too, and come to the conclusion with the support of the group of, I made a mistake. I think what I should do is maybe apologize to Jamie, maybe have a new team with more members so Jamie can play. Maybe the student can say, we need a new system for making teams so it's fair, whatever. We want the student involved who caused the harm, in this case, Taylor, to take responsibility, but it can't be forced on them. So when a student acts out and kind of the reflexive response is, oh, this student did something bad, apologize to the classmate you hurt. Sometimes the student will understand and will care and will do that because they think it's important. And other times the student is just going to say sorry because they think that's what they have to do to get out of whatever unpleasant situation they're in. So you want to take the time to have this kind of peace building circle. So Taylor has the opportunity to hear how Jamie and how the community was harmed and to take responsibility within the community. And also because as another state student might say, okay, well, I didn't do anything, but I also didn't help. So that makes me partially responsible too. So we want to think about ways to create those conditions where students are able to take responsibility when they have caused harm and to try to repair that harm when it happens. So now we have addressed the harm that was caused. And so let's think about the collaborative solutions. So that is where the student might have already taken responsibility, has already thought about what they did wrong, and then thought about how can we prevent this in the future. So Dave Mazza actually shared one possibility for preventing this in the future. But I can ask the rest of the group, let's brainstorm ways that we can work together to prevent similar situations in the future. So we have talked about the harm, we have identified how we all feel. Taylor has taken responsibility, has apologized. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What are we going to do to prevent it? And so I can hear from you as the group, what are we going to do to prevent this harm in the future? Again, feel free to unmute yourself or just type it in the chat box. How are we going to prevent this harm in the future? And we want to have a discussion round around this topic. And finally, once everyone has shared, everyone has had the opportunity to talk about ways of how they feel, how this has impacted them. We're then ready for closing. I would like, as we close, for us to each share one positive takeaway from today's circle. So it could be one thing that you appreciate about our community, one thing you appreciate about this process, whatever you'd like to share, something positive. Would anyone like our talking piece?
I'll
Brittany?
chime in again. Thank you. I think that, together we were able to kind of figure out how to get along again. And I feel like this won't happen again because we have a plan for how to make sure everyone's included.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we had a really great conversation. And for me as the facilitator, I'm just always so impressed with how seriously you all take this and how much you care about doing this process in a way that is inclusive. So I feel really grateful that we have the ability to do this as a group. And I'm grateful to each and every one of you for being trusting enough and to be willing to share. So I would like to close out with a ritual as we always do. And oh, if any of you have anything to share in the chat box, please feel free. But I would like us to finish off with a ritual. We're going to do another short moment of silence, and we're each going to take those 5 deep breaths in and out. And try to just focus on what we just did, or try to empty your mind and just think about breathing. So take one more really deep breath, breathe in and breathe out. So thank you everyone for participating. I'm glad we were able to have that really constructive conversation and really constructive activity for reintegrating everyone into the program and making sure that the kind of exclusionary behavior that happened before doesn't happen again. So thank you everyone for participating. I'm so glad we were able to do this. I'd love to hear from you in the chat box as we have just done that activity. Imagine yourself as a student. How do you think you would respond? How do you think you would feel if you were part of this peace building activity? So I'd love to hear from you in the chat box if you're thinking about, well, maybe how you feel just having been in it. Try to put yourself in the shoes of, an adolescent, of how this experience might go for them. I also want to point out that we really did this in a pretty short period of time. In reality, your peace building circle will probably take, a lot more time. Maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, who knows? It's going to depend on the topic. It's going to depend on how frequently you do these, etc. So when you're doing a peace building circle that's a little longer, you do want to think about building in check-in opportunities, making sure that everybody feels safe, everybody feels comfortable. And those could be another kind of round robin of one word to describe your feeling, or you could have, kind of hand signals of, we always call it like fist of five, of like, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 is really terrible, and 5 is like, I feel amazing, I feel great, I love this. So providing opportunities to check in is also really valuable during this peace building process because it can be emotionally intense, especially for the student who may have caused harm. So for Taylor, it could maybe potentially feel like everybody's ganging up on her because we're all talking about how we feel after this other student was excluded. So we want to create an environment where Taylor has the opportunity to understand how their actions impacted others, and also to know that this is about bringing them back into the fold and reintegrating them back into the program. So peace building is not an easy process. It's something that takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of relationships with your students because they have to know, okay, maybe people are saying how I hurt them this time, but that doesn't mean I'm not part of this program anymore. It doesn't mean I don't have any friends here. It means that I did something wrong. I'm going to take responsibility for it. And then there's going to be an opportunity to move on and to kind of return to that normal, the normal relationships that I have. So you do want to be careful about checking in, especially if there's a student who's done harm, because this can be emotionally intensive in some cases. So you want to be able to check in with how students are feeling, how students are doing when you're doing this activity. So thank you for everyone for your participation in both the chat box and unmuted with our fake little activity piece. There we go. So thank you, everyone. So a peace building circle is something that you are doing with a group involved. So this is going to include the student who caused harm. This is going to include any students that were witnesses. This is going to bring in the student who was harmed and have that opportunity for discussion between them. But this is not the only way that we can engage in those kinds of constructive conversation. And one of the other approaches I want to highlight is the use of formal conferences. Formal conferences are used to address like serious issues with the affected parties. These are structured meetings that are aimed to repair harm and restore relationships. This process can include a lot of preparation where participants are informed about the purpose and structure of the conference, the meeting itself. They know about the protocol, the process ahead of time, and they are an opportunity for open dialogue. So this is an opportunity for the student who caused harm and the student who experienced the harm, student or students who experienced the harm, to come together. But these are especially useful and especially used in the context of much more serious harms. And we are going to follow a much more kind of stringent protocol where we have that open dialogue focused on the incident where harm was caused, and everyone has the opportunity to share how they're feeling. But when we're doing a formal conference, we also want to make sure that we're addressing root causes. So sometimes students act out because something is going on at home. Sometimes students act out because they themselves are experiencing bullying. Sometimes students act out because they don't have the conflict resolution skills they need to respond in a way that is pro-social, in a way that is appropriate. So part of formal conferences, let's try to get to the underlying causes, why students did what they did. So formal conferences is much more focused on that kind of direct, like the direct relationship, the direct implication between the student who caused the harm and the student or students who were harmed by this conflict. And so this is an opportunity to try to help improve conditions. If you're understanding the root causes, then you can make a plan to address the harms that are being caused to the student and try to prevent that behavior in the future. And we want to promote healing and reconciliation because we are part of a community, even when one student harms another. The student has to be reintegrated, and we have to bring that community feeling and that sense of safety back to the group. We want to make sure that it's comprehensive. Everybody has a chance to be heard, both the person who has caused harm and the person who has been harmed. The person who's been harmed needs to have the opportunity to share what happened to them, and for you all to come to a mutually agreed on resolution. You want to build that consensus so that everyone feels acknowledged and valued and heard and seen. And so this is actually a topic that we're going to be addressing in our next session on conflict resolution. So I don't want to go into it with much depth because that is something that you are going to see a lot more of at the next restorative practices session. So hold on because that is coming to you. I just want to close out really on thinking about what we started with is the importance of those proactive supports versus reactive supports. When we are really purposeful and really concentrate on building that foundation through proactive supports, we can make sure that the reactive measures are effective. The first time you try a peace building circle should not be when harm has happened. It can and should happen ahead of time so that students are prepared, they know what to expect, they know the expectations. Nothing should be a surprise. So when you are proactive in that process, that will then make the reactive response much more effective because sometimes things happen, we do need to step in. But if students are really familiar with the process, we've already done the work of creating a positive learning environment where everybody feels safe and heard and seen. It's much, much easier to get everybody on the same page. So thank you everyone for joining us for this great session on restorative practices, really talking about peace building circles in particular. I really appreciate your participation and the members of our team who joined us. You can always reach out to us at info@21stcclcntac.org. You can follow us on social media. The QR codes are on the board to hear about upcoming webinars, events, to follow us and hear about all the special things we're doing, all the cool places we're traveling. So I hope you will join us. Brittany also shared in the chat box a link to our feedback form. We would love if you would take the time to fill that out. Let us know how we did. Give us feedback so we can continue to improve. So we'd really appreciate hearing from you. And thank you everyone for being here, for being part of our community and being part of this learning experience. If you haven't visited our website yet, please do make sure you visit our website. and learn more about all the cool resources we have available for you, and learn about how we can support you and your program site to be even more successful. And you can find us at 21stcclcntech.org. So you can join us there if you haven't checked out our website yet. A quick reminder about the upcoming summer symposium. Registration is now open, and that will be July 31st to August 1st in San Francisco. Registration is free, so I hope we will see you there and have an opportunity to really dive into more of these relevant topics. So if you haven't already, please click on that feedback form. Let us know how we did, and we will see you at our next webinar. We have a lot of great events coming up, and we hope that we will see you there. And Brittany, it's a pleasure to be with you as always.
Thanks, Yana. Great session today.